The year is 460. In an ancient city about an hour and a half's drive northeast of modern Porto, Portugal, and roughly 250 miles northwest of Madrid, Spain, famine and fear press on every side. Raiding tribes strip villages bare, heresies spread inside the churches, and the sky itself seems filled with warnings. In the middle of this, a bishop named Hydatius takes up his pen. He writes down what others would rather forget: violence, hunger, corruption, and signs of judgment. His chronicle is less about emperors and more about survival, the faith of ordinary Christians under siege. To him, sin rots faster than swords, and memory is the only defense left. But if the world truly seemed to be ending, why did Hydatius keep writing? From the That's Jesus channel, welcome to Coach, where church origins and church history actually coach us how to walk boldly with Jesus today. I'm Bob Balch, and on Monday we stay between 0 and 500 AD. In this episode, we're in the year 460 as Bishop Hydatius finishes his running diary of disaster and faith, preserving the collapse of Roman Spain and raising questions about how we record our own lives for the generations to come. Hydatius was born around the year 400 in the rugged hills of northern Portugal. As a boy, he traveled to the Holy Land with his mother and met Jerome, the scholar who translated the entire Bible into Latin, a version that shaped Christian life for centuries. At that time, Jerome had recently finished a running diary of world events written year by year. That kind of record is called a Chronicle. And years later, Hydatius became bishop of a frontier city, battered by hunger, raiders, and heresy. And in 460, he finished his own chronicle, finishing up where Jerome had stopped in 378 and carrying the story into his own lifetime. Now, this was no polished history from Rome's palaces. Hydatius wrote from the edge of collapse, recording the dangers pressing in on his region and the moral decay he believed fueled them. He set out not to glorify Rome, but to warn the church, convinced that history itself was rushing toward an end. Now, Hydatius wrote with urgency because his world kept unraveling. Raids emptied villages, famine forced families to scatter, and false teaching spread like infection. He warned that these disasters were not random. To him, they were signs that sin had weakened the foundations of society and that judgment was at the door. His chronicle lists celestial warnings like eclipses and comets, even falling stars, as if heaven itself were echoing the chaos on earth. Hydatius lived as if the end of the world was imminent, pointing to every disaster as proof that the end was about to come. For him, the evidence was overwhelming. Though history shows that suffering itself does not always signal the finish line, he thought that it did. He was not the only Christian writer wrestling with disaster. A generation earlier, Augustine of Hippo had written The City of God in the 420s. Now, Augustine argued that Rome's fall was not the end of God's story, but a reminder that every earthly empire will crumble while God's kingdom endures. Hydatius knew that framework, but his writing shows what he felt like when collapse was not an idea on parchment, but a daily crisis right outside your door. Hydatius also notes the courage of pastors who resisted heresy. Even when invaders tried to impose their beliefs on them, he describes them as holding the line when emperors and generals could not. One entry reflects his tone of warning and hope, quote, "The church, though attacked, endured by the mercy of God," end quote. For Hydatius, the survival of faith was one steady light against the darkness. By 460, the story he recorded broke through into his own life. Raiders stormed his city, and he was dragged away as a prisoner. For 3 months, the bishop who had warned of judgment sat behind enemy walls. When he was finally released, he wrote it down with stark simplicity, as if to prove that God's mercy still broke through the terror. His chronicle becomes most personal here. The story of collapse had swallowed him too. And that honesty is what makes his writing so striking. Hydatius does not hide behind titles or distance. He records his weaknesses alongside his faith, famine alongside prayer, despair alongside survival. And the effect is heavy, almost unbearable, yet it's precisely that weight which makes his record priceless. He shows us how it felt when the old world fell apart, but his chronicle closes without a tidy ending, only the haunting sense that more disaster was on the way. So what can such a dark record possibly mean for us today? Hydatius set a standard. In a world unraveling, he chose to record famine and invasion and heresy, but also the endurance of faith. Without his chronicle, the collapse of Roman Spain would be almost silent. Later historians, from Isidore of Seville to medieval monks, they leaned on his record to understand how an empire crumbled, but the church survived. One bishop, Hydatius, writing in the rubble, gave later centuries their memory of what mattered. And that challenges us today. Hydatius preserved the works of God in his generation. What will we preserve in our generation? We live in an age where everything is recorded, but so little is remembered. 10 generations from now, will our digital trail show disciples clinging to Christ, or only a people consumed by distractions? Selfies, plates of food, endless busyness. We are experts at capturing the trivial while neglecting the eternal. We also live surrounded by disaster, the same as Hydatius. Earthquakes, floods, fires, wars, crimes of every kind fill our screens every single day. Yet, unlike Hydatius, we rarely live as though the end is near. We dismiss warnings until another self-proclaimed prophet sets a date. But Scripture says we have been living in the last days ever since the time of Jesus. Hydatius believed that truth, and he wrote with urgency. Our generation believes it too, but just scrolls by with no urgency at all. The world around us has inverted its compass. It calls good evil and evil good. It dismisses faith as outdated, and it celebrates sin as progress. Hydatius's witness rises from the 5th century to confront us. What will your generation leave behind? 10 generations from now, will people say we lived with purpose? Or will they say that we were consumed with distraction? Hydatius teaches us that memory is stewardship. He preserved faith through collapse. What will we preserve through convenience? If Hydatius wrote with tears in his ink, then we should at least write with hands that are trembling. Look around. The people you love will not be here forever. The small, ordinary moments, an evening when your child finally prays out loud, the neighbor who shows up with a casserole when you're broken, the old hymn hummed in a living room. Those are the things that become a safe deposit box of grace for the next generation. 10 great-grandchildren from now will not care how perfect our kitchens looked. They will care whether we taught them to pray, whether we taught them why the cross mattered, and whether someone in the family left a testimony that pointed them back to Jesus. This is not a lecture. It's an invitation. It's an invitation to stop living like everything is an archive and start living like something holy depends on you. Pick one story this week and write it down. Call somebody and ask them about a memory regarding faith, and then record it. Read 5 verses out loud at supper. Don't rush. Let the words land. Here's one. Choose one permission slip and say no, so you can say yes to dinner at home. Forgive the person that you have rehearsed bitterness against. Teach your child a passage of Scripture and explain why it matters. If Hydatius could stand in the rubble and record mercy, we can put down our phones long enough to hand faith forward. Don't wait until a disaster forces you to reconsider what matters. Begin now. People, children, grandchildren, they're already watching our every move. If this story of Hydatius challenged or encouraged you, like, comment, and share it with a friend. They might really need to hear it. Leave a review on your podcast app, and don't forget to follow Coach for more episodes every week. Check out the show notes. It has the full transcript and sources used for this episode. And if you look closely, you'll find some contrary opinions in there. We do that on purpose. You never know what you're going to get next on Coach. Every episode dives into a different corner of church history, but on Mondays, we stay between 0 and 500 AD. And if you'd rather access these stories on YouTube, just check us out at the That's Jesus channel. Thanks for listening to Coach, where church origins and church history actually coach us how to walk boldly with Jesus today. I'm Bob Balch with the That's Jesus channel. Have a great day and be blessed.